Well, it's time to give a different football game a try. Well, as you might recall, I parted ways with Action PC Football a few months ago. Now, Action PC Football is not a horrible game. However, there are some strange things that the computer does, and it's really not that much fun to play with such a closed engine. Plus, well, honestly, it really doesn't feel like real football to me. Part of this is because of how you call plays. Although there are numerous play options, they're still pretty generic. This is especially true on defense. I mean, you can't place your defenders to cover up a certain hole, for example. You basically wind up just making a few generic selections and kind of hope for the best. And since the game engine is behind an iron curtain, you can't ever figure out why the choice you made was right or wrong. Believe me, I've tried. And so I figured it was time to move on. Now, as many of you guys know, there are quite a few football games to choose from, but this time around I had my sights set on one game in particular. And I wanted to grab the board game. I know that there's a computer game, but I really want to learn how to play the game first before I start messing around with something that's easy and fast. Now, 4th Street Football is not exactly a quick game. It's fairly complex and it's quite detailed, as you're about to see. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure it all out. Anyway, I thought it would be really interesting for us to sort of figure it out together. However, starting with some of the more basic aspects of how the game works. Well, you know, the easiest way to explain 4th Street Football is probably to start from a play. So this is a basic running play from the pro set formation. This is a draw play with the fullback. And as you can see, this play is actually diagrammed out. It's not just an abstract draw play. As we'll see in a second, offensive players that might not seem important in other games can be really impactful in this one. So I know that this particular aspect of football games is different from one game to another. Now, I grew up playing APBA football with my father. I mean, I was like 8 or 9 when he got the new Master game in the early 90s. It's fun, but as many of you already know, and as other people have said on YouTube, you don't get to use the vast majority of the player cards in APBA. Well, 4th Street Football is completely different. You will use all the cards, and every single player might wind up being really important. Well, let's look at that play diagram again. You see that there are all these numbers 1 to 3, 4 to 6, and so on up to 20. There are also these letters next to the numbers. Those letters correspond to certain players: tackles, guards, the center, the tight end, a flanker, and so on. Now, those numbers correspond to the basic way you figure out what happened with the play. They correspond with the 20-sided die that comes with the game. Ah yes, the 20-sided die. So, as many of you already know, my dad grew up playing APBA, and he used to tell me that this 20-sided die that you'd see in games like Stratomatic was the sure sign of being a geek, so I've found my place. Honestly though, this stuff is actually really useful, as we're about to see. Now, when you roll the die, the number you get will correspond with one of those zones listed on the play card. So let's say you roll a 1. In this case, the matchup will involve the left tackle. Or say you roll a 20. In this case, the matchup will involve the fullback who managed to get to the second level. So you see why this game is so interesting? I mean, you can actually visualize what's going on. It's not about just throwing like some button clicking into some black box somewhere and getting a bunch of text in response. Now, the other interesting thing is that you can pretty much set up your defense however you want. This is the part that still kind of overwhelms me. You can place your players pretty much wherever you want on defense. The instruction manual is pretty helpful here, especially for clueless people like me. So this is what a normal 4-3 defense would probably look like. You can arrange your backs to plug up some of the lanes, or if you think it's better, you can leave some of those lanes open and stack players up trying to cut down the run. And of course, you can stick extra players into the box. So those white numbers with circles around them represent player tokens, which you get with the game. But the truth is that that's mostly important when you have a human opponent. Now, my understanding is that that setup is somewhat similar to the Stratomatic Advanced football game, but I have to admit that I've never actually played that, so I don't know. Well, for single player games, there is an option to use these solo defensive play cards. In fact, that's what I'm doing to remove the overwhelming number of possibilities. Plus, of course, it's really no fun to play defense if you already know what the offense is going to do. The company also offers offensive play calling sheets to allow you to just focus on playing defense, though apparently I forgot to buy one of those when I made my order. Anyway, now that we've dug a little bit into that world of play calling, let's take a look and see how the game actually plays. Okay, let's use that same offensive play call, that fullback dive play. We're going to have the 1985 San Francisco 49ers on offense. And as you can see here, the roster sheet is actually quite detailed with a whole ton of information. Now in the Pro set, Roger Craig will be the fullback. This is what his card looks like. Now for this play, we'll have the 1985 New York Giants on defense. We'll stick them in their familiar 3-4 defense, and this is what the roster is. In fact, we'll choose a specific defensive setup, this 3-4 number 1 even, which is probably the most standard 3-4 defense out there. By the way, those numbers with even and odd designations on these defensive cards are designed to make it really easy to have like an automatic defensive play calling system. So you use a 6-sided die you go to the even numbers if the result is even, and to the odd numbers if it's odd. It might say in the rulebook 10-sided die, it doesn't really matter. And then you roll this one, this 12-sided die, and you go to the corresponding numbers. So 1 through 9 have their own cards, 10 through 12 are on the roster sheet. It's kind of complex, yeah, but it also helps give personalities to certain teams. Now we're supposed to roll the 20-sided die, the 10-sided die, and 2 6-sided dice all at the same time. Now that's a little bit complex, so we're going to just take this one roll at a time in sequence. So first we're going to start off with the 20-sided die. There it is. Let's say that we roll a 13. That means that the play will enter into this zone where the right tackle is blocking. On defense, that's where the left defensive end is playing. So per the platoon sheet, the right tackle for San Francisco will be Keith Fahnhorst. Here's his card. And for New York, it will be Curtis McGriff. Here's his card. Now, as you can see on those cards, there are 5 columns per player, that's A through E. There are also 11 different dice rolls that range from 2 to 12. Now, the dice rolls are what you get when you take these 2 6-sided dice and roll them together and add them up, like Stratomatic. And the columns are used depending upon what role the player is playing and what's going on with the play. We figure out which column to use by looking at the play card. Right next to that right tackle is this letter B. That means that we use Fahnhorst's B column. Now we look up a little bit. On the defensive box we see the letter A. That means that we're going to use McGriff's A column. So let's look at the 2 players together. We will compare McGriff's A column with Fahnhorst's B column, and we want to look at those numbers that are right under the letters but above the dice rolls. Fahnhorst has a 7 under B, McGriff has a 4 under A. We then do some subtraction, the offensive player's number minus the defensive player's number. Okay, now we look at the 10-sided die. So if the 10-sided die results in a 0, 1, 2, or 3, it's 0, not 10, it means that Fahnhorst wins the matchup. In other words, he's going to have a 40% chance of winning this matchup. Now, a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 will mean that McGriff wins the matchup. He has a 60% chance. In other words, if the dice roll is higher than the number that we get after our subtraction problem, the defensive player wins. If it's lower, the offensive player wins, and a tie goes to the defense. Let's say the roll was a 3. That means that Fahnhorst wins. Okay, so now we roll the 2 6-sided die and we add them together. Let's say we got a 6, a 2, and a 4. We look at row 3 and column B on Fahnhorst's card and we get 0, 6. We then look at the chart and see that it was a gain of 6 yards. Now I should point out here that sometimes winning the matchup means something bad happened. For example, if the 2 dice added up to 4, we would get a 15. That would be an illegal motion play on the offense. Or if the 2 dice added up to 12, 2 6s, we would get a 19. That would be a holding call on the offense for a 10-yard penalty. Okay, just for fun, let's see what would have happened if McGriff had won the matchup. Remember that we're looking under his A column because that's what the play tells us. The 0-0 result means no gain. In other words, Curtis blew up the play. If we got a total of 6, the result would be 8-3. That would be a 1-yard loss. So as you can see, there's a huge variety of results from every single player card. Not only that, but all of the players make a difference, which is different than in other games. Plus, you can see exactly what difference they make. Let's say that we rolled a 12 with a 20-sided die instead of a 13. That would go to the offense's right guard. Remember that the defense has nobody covering that zone. That means that the offense automatically wins the matchup. So we then look at Randy Cross's B column and roll the dice. Say that we got a 7. That gives us a gain of 8 yards, which is about right considering that the hole was left wide open. So as you can see, it's really important to place your defenders strategically, and you're not going to be able to get away with just having a bunch of lower rate linemen and great running backs and wide receivers like you can in some games. Hint, hint if you're a draft player. Anyway, let's take a look now at a passing play. Okay, this play is a basic hitch pass over to the wide receiver, which this game calls a flanker. Now take a look at how the numbers are distributed. There's only a 25% chance here that the lineman will determine this play. Compare that to the running play that we just saw, where there was a 75% chance that it would be determined by the lineman. So as you can tell, different kinds of plays alone can create all sorts of different outcomes. That is, the play itself can dictate a different outcome. The nice thing is that you can actually take the time to analyze different plays and figure out which one would be the best for you, which one fits with your strategy the best. And best of all, you can actually see why it's not just a black box. Alright, let's say we roll an 11 with our 20-sided die. That means that the zone is right where the middle linebacker usually is. And the 11 means that it's the flanker. For the 49ers, this will be Freddie Solomon. Back to the play card, we're comparing Solomon's C column with the C column of the defender. We'll use that same basic 3-4 defensive card. That means that players numbers 5 and 6 for the Giants are in that zone. That's right, you can have 2 players in the same zone. In fact, you can have 3 players in the same zone. And like I've been saying all along, you can see all of this right in front of you. Well, player number 5 is Harry Carson, and player number 6 is Gary Reasons. Now, we compare all 3 players' cards. We add the C columns of Carson and Reasons up. 3 plus 3 is 6. Solomon's C column gives us a 6, and 6 minus 6 is 0, which means that Solomon only has a 10% chance of winning. Now let's say that the 10-sided dice roll is a 9, so that means the defense won the matchup. Now, we're supposed to have the defensive player with the lower rating make the play, but Carson and Reasons have the same rating. So I'm assuming that this means that we can just simply choose who makes the play, so we'll go with Harry Carson. Well, then we roll 2 dice and we consult the C column on Carson's card. Let's say that the roll totaled to a 5. That means the result is a 0-2. That would be a 2-yard gain. So the pass was caught in the end, but there was a minimal gain. It was good defense, but still a completion. So going back to his card, we can see all of these 46 results. Those would be incomplete passes. And so through stuff like this, you can see just how complex this game is. Just because one player won the matchup doesn't mean that he'll necessarily get the best result, which in my opinion is a lot like actual football. And as people have said on the Delphi forums about this game, you can really see how dominant certain players were. Look at Lawrence Taylor's card, for example. 45 forces the quarterback to run, 46 is an incomplete pass, and 47 and 48 are massive sacks. Or look at Joe Montana's card. Those 11s are all 10-yard gains plus whatever the 10-sided die gave you. And that 10 in column C shows how good he was at short passing. The 9 in column D shows his medium passing rating. Of course, there's no guarantee that you'll actually end up using the quarterback's card on passing plays. Anyway, that's a really basic example of how the game plays and of some of the things that you need to consider as you go along. I'll be back with more once I've had the time to really dig into this game. There are a lot of possibilities here. In fact, this makes me really want to spend time going back and watching old game film with all of these play cards at my side, just to sort of see how things work and to kind of understand how this corresponds with real life. We might have more videos about that in the future as well, so stay tuned.